Apparently, finding your husband's soulmate on his face after a Vegas trip isn't what they mean by expanding your social network. Brooks, my husband of 10 years, waltzed back into our perfectly manicured Westfield home on a Sunday night, looking like he'd just won the lottery and discovered penicillin simultaneously. He had a glow, a smug little smirk that usually meant he'd found the last artisanal kombucha at Whole Foods. But this time, it was worse. Much, much worse. He dropped his carry-on, the same one I'd bought him for his birthday, mind you, took a deep breath of the air I'd meticulously purified with essential oils, and declared, "Reagan, I found someone better than you." Oh, honey. He had no idea who had really found someone better. Or, more accurately, who had found a better life. Because while Brooks was busy finding his true love in a city known for making bad decisions permanent, I was busy changing the locks, transferring our joint account, and, oh yes, dating our very attractive divorce lawyer neighbor, Spencer. The one who lives 2 houses down and actually knows how to use a dishwasher. Let's rewind a bit, shall we? It was Thursday, October 10th, when Brooks, my dear sales director husband, announced he was off to Las Vegas for a critical medical device conference. Critical indeed. Critical for his ego, perhaps, and critically bad for his bank account, as it turned out. He kissed me goodbye, a perfunctory peck on the cheek, the kind you give a distant aunt at Thanksgiving. And off he went, suitcase in hand, a spring in his step, and a whole lot of marital obliviousness trailing behind him like a cheap cologne. I stood there, in our pristine foyer, watching him go, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel a pang of sadness. I felt liberation, like a federal holiday had just been declared in my soul. Our 10 years together had slowly morphed into a masterclass in passive-aggressive cohabitation. Brooks was the king of leaving his dirty socks next to the hamper, not in it. He believed loading the dishwasher meant stacking plates precariously on top of each other, creating a Jenga tower of grime. And his idea of a romantic evening was me watching him play Call of Duty, while he occasionally grunted in my general direction. We lived in a beautiful, sprawling house in a gated community in Westfield, the kind of place where the HOA has opinions on the exact shade of beige your mailbox should be, and where everyone pretends their lives are perfect while secretly judging your lawn. Our life was a perfectly curated Instagram feed, devoid of any real connection. I was Reagan Blackwell, 34, a marketing manager who could launch a viral campaign in her sleep, but couldn't get her husband to notice she'd cut her hair. So, when Brooks announced his Vegas pilgrimage, a little light bulb flickered above my head. Not a sad, dim bulb, but a neon sign flashing, "Opportunity knocks." I'd been feeling this slow burn of discontent for months, a quiet hum of, "there has to be more to life than this," that had grown into a full-blown symphony. I'd seen the subtle shifts in his behavior, the late-night texts he'd try to hide, the sudden interest in his phone's privacy settings. I wasn't stupid. I was just biding my time, waiting for him to make the first, undeniable move. And Vegas? Oh, Vegas was practically a neon-lit invitation for him to screw up spectacularly. That Friday, October 11th, while Brooks was probably sipping overpriced cocktails and making questionable life choices, I was having coffee with Spencer, our neighbor from 2 houses down. Spencer, a sharp, impeccably dressed man in his early 40s, was a divorce attorney. And yes, the irony was not lost on me. We'd always been friendly, exchanging pleasantries over mailboxes and at the occasional neighborhood block party. He had a kind smile and eyes that actually listened when you spoke, unlike Brooks, whose eyes usually scanned the room for the nearest TV. "So, Reagan," Spencer had said, stirring his latte, "you seem unusually chipper for someone whose husband is on a work trip to Vegas." He had a way of cutting through the suburban veneer with a gentle, knowing smirk. I laughed, a genuine, unforced sound that surprised even myself. "Let's just say I'm embracing the quiet," I replied, then leaned in conspiratorially. "Or maybe I'm embracing the opportunity to finally get a good night's sleep without someone snoring through 3 walls." He chuckled, and I knew. In that moment, he understood. Later that afternoon, I was sitting in Spencer's home office, A room filled with impressive law books and an even more impressive view of his perfectly manicured backyard. "Reagan, are you sure about this?" he'd asked, his brow furrowed with professional concern, but his eyes held a hint of something else, admiration perhaps. "Brooks has been less than subtle lately, and I've been doing my homework. I'd been gathering evidence for weeks, little breadcrumbs of digital infidelity he'd carelessly left behind. Screenshots, deleted messages recovered, even a hotel booking confirmation from a previous conference that wasn't quite what it seemed. It was all there, a neat little package of betrayal. "Spencer," I said, a steely resolve in my voice that I hadn't known I possessed. "I'm not just sure. I'm ready. He thinks he's off living his best life. I'm about to live mine." By the end of that day, the paperwork was initiated. The joint account was in the process of being transferred to a new, solo account in my name, and a locksmith was scheduled for Saturday morning. I felt a thrill, a surge of adrenaline that was far more potent than any retail therapy at Target could ever provide. Saturday, October 12th, dawned bright and clear, a perfect autumn day in New Jersey. The locksmith was efficient, changing every lock in the house. I even had him rekey the garage door opener. "Just for peace of mind," I'd told him, with a smile that probably looked a little too triumphant. That evening, Spencer and I had dinner at a charming little Italian place downtown. It wasn't a date in the traditional sense, more like a strategic planning session disguised as a pleasant meal. We talked about legal strategies, asset division, and the best way to handle a man who thought he was untouchable. But we also talked about books, travel, and the ridiculousness of HOA meetings. It was nice, refreshingly normal. And when he walked me back to my now secure front door, the air between us crackled with an unspoken understanding. And then came Sunday, October 13th, the day Brooks Blackwell, my soon-to-be ex-husband, decided to make his grand re-entrance. He pulled his shiny black SUV into the driveway, the sound of the engine a familiar rumble that used to signal home, but now just screamed impending disaster. He walked up to the front door, fumbling for his key, a triumphant grin plastered on his face. He tried the key. It didn't work. He tried again, a flicker of confusion crossing his features. He glanced at the lock, then back at the door, as if it had personally offended him. "Reagan?" he called out, his voice tinged with annoyance. "The key isn't working!" I took a deep breath, adjusted the silk robe I was wearing, a gift from me to me, and walked to the door, opening it just enough to reveal my perfectly composed face. He stood there, looking disheveled but still radiating that obnoxious glow. His eyes scanned my face, then the freshly painted entryway, then back to my eyes, a slow dawning of realization beginning to creep in. "Reagan, what's going on?" he asked, his voice losing some of its earlier bravado. He tried to push past me, but I held my ground. "Brooks," I said, my voice calm, almost serene. "We need to talk." And that's when he hit me with it, the line he'd probably rehearsed on the plane, the one he thought would shatter my world. "I found someone better than you." He puffed out his chest, expecting me to crumble. Oh, honey, if only he knew. The look on his face when I finally let him in, not to our home, but to the reality of his situation, was going to be priceless. He thought he was delivering a knockout punch, but he was about to walk straight into a legal and financial ambush of my own design. The game, as they say, was officially on. The air in our meticulously decorated foyer, usually scented with whatever seasonal candle I'd chosen, suddenly thickened with the pungent odor of Brooks's desperation. He stood there, jaw slightly agape, one hand still gripping the now useless house key, the other clutching his carry-on like a security blanket. His triumphant smirk had vanished, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment, as if he'd just witnessed his own reflection spontaneously combust. "What do you mean, we need to talk?" he stammered, his voice cracking, the bravado from his "I found someone better" declaration evaporating faster than a mirage in the Nevada desert. He tried to push past me again, a flicker of his old entitled self returning, but I blocked his path with a calm resolve that surprised even me. My silk robe, a subtle rebellion against his usual demand for sweatpants, felt like a superhero cape. It means, Brooks, I began, my voice steady, that while you were off discovering your soulmate and the alleged cure for cancer, I was busy discovering that life without dirty underwear on the bathroom floor is infinitely better. I watched as his eyes, usually so quick to dismiss or ignore, finally focused on mine, searching for a joke, a hint of my usual sarcastic resignation. There was none. Just a cool, unwavering gaze that reflected the steel I'd forged over the past few days. His confusion morphed into an ugly shade of anger. "What are you talking about, Reagan? This isn't funny. Let me in. I'm tired." He gestured vaguely at the house. His house, as if I were merely a temporary obstacle, a misplaced garden gnome. But this wasn't his house anymore. Not in the way he thought. It was my house, and I was the gatekeeper. "Tired?" I echoed, a sardonic smile playing on my lips. "Oh, I'm sure you are. Vegas can be quite exhausting, especially when you're busy draining your emotional reserves. And, as it turns out, your financial ones too." That last part hung in the air, a subtle poison dart aimed directly at his carefully constructed world. He flinched, a barely perceptible tremor, but I saw it. I always saw everything. "Financial reserves? What are you babbling about?" he demanded, his voice rising. The neighbors probably wondering if our perfect suburban facade was finally cracking. Good. Let them wonder. "And what's with the locks? Did you seriously rekey the house? Are you out of your mind?" "Out of my mind?" I chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "No, Brooks. For the first time in a very long time, I'm perfectly sane. And yes, the locks are changed. Effective yesterday, Saturday, October 12th, to be precise. You see, I decided that since you were off exploring new horizons, I should probably secure my own." I stepped back, just enough to let him see the new gleaming brass of the deadbolt. It was a small detail, but it spoke volumes. His face went from red to a pasty white. You changed the locks? Without telling me? What kind of stunt is this, Reagan?" He looked genuinely hurt, which was almost comical. The man who had just declared he found someone better than me was now wounded by a new set of keys. The audacity was breathtaking. "A stunt?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you call taking control of my own life? Because I call it self-preservation. And speaking of preservation, let's discuss our joint account." I watched his eyes widen, a dawning horror creeping into them. He knew. He knew the implications of that statement. Our joint account?" he whispered, the anger draining out of him replaced by a cold dread. "What about it?" "Well," I continued, enjoying the slow unraveling of his composure, "it's no longer our joint account, Brooks. As of Friday, October 11th, the funds have been transferred, all of them, to a new solo account in my name. You see, I figured if you were going to embark on a new chapter, it was only fair that I start mine with a clean slate and a healthy balance." He stared at me, speechless for a moment, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You can't do that. That's illegal. That's theft." His voice was a strangled yell now, echoing in the quiet foyer. "Oh, Brooks," I sighed, shaking my head. "Always so dramatic. It's perfectly legal, especially when one spouse has been systematically draining funds for business expenses that mysteriously align with weekend getaways to places like Vegas. My lawyer assures me it's all above board." The mention of my lawyer hit him like a physical blow. His eyes darted around, suddenly noticing the subtle changes in the house, the new, more modern art print I'd hung, the absence of his ridiculously oversized golf clubs by the door. He was seeing the house, and me, for the first time in years. And he didn't like what he saw. "Your lawyer?" he spluttered. "What lawyer? What are you talking about?" "Spencer," I said, a small, genuine smile finally gracing my lips. "Our neighbor, Spencer, the divorce attorney. He's been wonderfully helpful, actually. Very insightful about marital assets, infidelity clauses, and the general legal ramifications of a husband jetting off to Vegas with his colleague while his wife is at home, patiently collecting evidence." The color drained from his face completely. Spencer, our quiet, unassuming neighbor, the man he'd occasionally wave to while retrieving the mail. The realization that I had not only moved on, but had done so with the assistance of someone within his immediate sphere, was clearly a bitter pill to swallow. His betrayal was public, or at least semi-public, and he hadn't even known it. "Evidence?" he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "What evidence?" "Oh, Brooks, did you really think I wouldn't notice? The late-night texts, the burner phone you thought I didn't know about, the conference in Miami last month that suspiciously coincided with a luxury hotel booking for two? I'm a marketing manager, darling. My job is to analyze data, spot trends, and anticipate consumer behavior. You were a very predictable campaign." I paused, letting that sink in. "And your soulmate? The one who's better than me? I have a feeling she's going to be quite the topic of conversation in our divorce proceedings." He looked utterly lost, like a child who'd wandered into a maze and suddenly realized he was alone. The smugness, the arrogance, the self-satisfaction, all of it had been stripped away, leaving behind a hollow shell of a man. He reached for the doorknob, instinctively, as if to steady himself, then remembered it was my doorknob now. I don't understand," he mumbled, his gaze distant. She wouldn't what, Brooks?" I prompted, a hint of genuine curiosity in my voice. "Wouldn't leave you? Wouldn't take your money? Wouldn't turn out to be a professional con artist who saw a mark and took him for everything he was worth?" His head snapped up, his eyes wide with a fresh wave of panic. "What? What are you saying? How do you know that?" "Let's just say," I replied, stepping back fully into the foyer, leaving him stranded on the porch, "that Karma has a very efficient, albeit brutal, delivery service. And it seems your soulmate decided to make a rather substantial withdrawal from your personal funds while you were busy making declarations of eternal love. Funny, isn't it? She emptied your accounts the same weekend you were emptying your heart. Talk about parallel journeys." The color drained from his face entirely, leaving him looking like a ghost. He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out his phone, his fingers trembling as he tried to unlock it. I knew what he was doing. He was checking his bank balance. He was checking for messages from his soulmate. He was checking for anything that could confirm or deny the devastating truth I had just laid before him. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic tapping of his fingers on the screen. I watched him, a strange mix of satisfaction and a faint, almost imperceptible sadness washing over me. Not sadness for him, but for the 10 years we had spent building a life that had ultimately crumbled into dust. He had thought he was escaping, finding something better, but all he had found was a mirror reflecting his own carelessness and a very expensive lesson in trust. "Reagan," he finally choked out, his voice hoarse, his eyes wide with terror. My account. It's empty." "And she's not answering." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading, desperate. The man who had just hours ago declared me obsolete was now looking at me like I was his last lifeline. "Reagan, we need to talk. About our marriage. We can fix this." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms, a serene smile on my face. "Oh, Brooks," I said softly, the words dripping with a sweetness that masked the sharp edge beneath. As my lawyer, Spencer, so eloquently put it, "Honey, you can't unchange those locks, and you certainly can't untransfer those funds. Karma, my dear, tastes like freedom, and right now, it tastes like victory." I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of my own liberation. The game was far from over, but the first round had definitely gone to me, and I was just getting started. Brooks stood there, a human train wreck in my perfectly manicured foyer, still clutching his phone like a lifeline that had just snapped. The sheer, unadulterated panic in his eyes was almost satisfying. It was the look of a man who just realized he'd traded a perfectly good, albeit slightly sarcastic, SUV for a lemon with no wheels and a lean on its non-existent engine. He was begging, pleading, trying to rewind the tape to a time before his grand Vegas declaration, before the locks changed, before his bank account became a barren wasteland. "Reagan, please," he whimpered, taking a tentative step forward. "We can talk about this. This is a misunderstanding. She must have made a mistake. My money. Our money." "Oh, Brooks, I sighed, leaning against the doorframe, enjoying the theatricality of the moment. There's no our money anymore, remember? And as for misunderstanding, I think the only misunderstanding here was your belief that you could waltz back into this house, declare your undying love for a woman you met at a conference, and expect me to hand you a warm casserole and a pat on the head. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy, thick with his despair. And as for her mistake, I assure you, darling, emptying your accounts was no mistake. It was a carefully executed financial maneuver, a professional courtesy, if you will, from one con artist to another. Except she was the professional, and you were the mark. His jaw dropped, a fresh wave of horror washing over him. Con artist? What are you talking about? How do you know that? Because, Brooks, unlike you, I pay attention, I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. When you first started talking about this amazing, brilliant, spiritual woman, my marketing manager brain immediately saw red flags. Too good to be true? Usually is. So, while you were busy planning your romantic escapade to Vegas, I was busy doing what I do best, market research. I pushed off the doorframe, walking slowly towards the living room, leaving him stranded in the foyer, forcing him to follow if he wanted answers. He stumbled after me, his carry-on still clutched in his hand, looking utterly bewildered. I started with her social media, I continued, gesturing vaguely towards the plush sofa where we'd spent countless evenings watching Netflix, oblivious to his impending implosion. Her profiles were curated, a little too perfect, all the right hashtags, all the right inspirational quotes, all the right photos of her travels and spiritual retreats. It was like a Pinterest board exploded into a fake life. And then there were the comments. Always the same generic praise, never any real interaction. That's when my spidey senses started tingling. I sat down, crossing my legs elegantly, and gestured for him to take the armchair opposite me. He hesitated, then slumped into it, looking utterly defeated. So, I did a deeper dive, I explained, enjoying the slow reveal. My old college roommate Chloe works in financial forensics for a big firm in New York. She owes me a favor from that disastrous spring break trip to Cancun where I saved her from marrying a mariachi singer. Anyway, I gave her the basics. Your soulmate's name, her alleged background, the timeline of your romance. Chloe, bless her heart, is a digital bloodhound. Brooks swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on me. A desperate plea for me to stop. But I was just getting warmed up. It turns out, I continued, savoring each word, your soulmate, whose real name isn't even Serafina, it's Brenda Mae Jenkins from Des Moines, Iowa, has a rather extensive history of finding love with financially stable, emotionally vulnerable men. She specializes in what Chloe charmingly calls romance scams with a side of asset stripping. She's got a whole network, a whole methodology. Vegas, apparently, is her favorite hunting ground. High rollers, men on business trips, lonely hearts looking for an escape from their suburban lives. I paused, letting the implications sink in. Sound familiar, Brooks? He buried his face in his hands, a low groan escaping his lips. Brenda Mae Jenkins? Des Moines? Yep. And her cure for cancer pitch? A classic. She preys on men with a savior complex. Men who want to feel important. Special. She probably told you you were the only one who truly understood her vision, didn't she? That you were her rock? Her inspiration? I watched him nod, his shoulders shaking. Of course she did. It's in the playbook. She even has a fake charity website, a shell corporation registered in Delaware, and a penchant for moving funds through offshore accounts faster than you can say IRS audit. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Brooks, the hotshot sales director, who prided himself on his business acumen, had been played like a fiddle by a woman named Brenda Mae from Des Moines. It was almost poetic. So, while you were busy falling head over heels for Serafina, Chloe was busy tracking the digital breadcrumbs, I explained. We found the transfers, the shell accounts, the whole 9 yards. She didn't just empty your joint account, Brooks. She also cleaned out your personal investment portfolio, your crypto wallet, and even that secret savings account you thought I didn't know about. Turns out she's a lot more thorough than you gave her credit for. Or perhaps more thorough than you were. He lifted his head, his face pale, eyes red-rimmed. But why didn't you tell me? Why did you let her do this? I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Oh, Brooks, where do I even begin? First, because you wouldn't have believed me. You were too deep in the new love haze. Second, because it served my purpose. You see, while you were busy being conned, I was busy getting my ducks in a row. Spencer has been invaluable. He's already filed the initial divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences and, more importantly, financial misconduct on your part. Financial misconduct? He sputtered. But she took the money. Exactly, I said, a triumphant glint in my eye. But you were the one who gave her access. You were the one who neglected your marital assets. And more importantly, you were the one who was off gallivanting with another woman, while I, your loyal wife, was left to pick up the pieces. Legally, that looks very, very bad for you, especially when combined with the evidence of your infidelity. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Spencer, being the brilliant legal mind he is, pointed out that your business expenses for these conferences could easily be reclassified as marital waste. And guess who gets to claim a larger share of the remaining assets to compensate for said waste? That's right, me. He stared at me, his mouth agape. The man who had always underestimated me, always dismissed my intelligence as cute or overthinking, was now seeing the full force of my strategic mind in action. I wasn't just a wife, I was a project manager, a data analyst, and now a legal strategist. So, while you were busy being a victim of a romance scam, I was busy turning your stupidity into my financial freedom, I concluded, a genuine smile finally spreading across my face. It's called leveraging, Brooks, something you, as a sales director, should understand. He looked around the living room at the life we had built, now irrevocably shattered. So this is it? You're just taking everything? Not everything, darling, I corrected him gently. Just what's fair, and what's legally mine. You'll still have your carry-on, of course, and probably a very expensive lesson in trusting women named Brenda May from Des Moines who claimed to be Serafina from Sedona. The weight of his situation seemed to finally crush him. He was homeless, penniless, at least temporarily, and utterly alone, and it was all his own doing. The delicious irony of it all was almost too much to bear. What about the house? He asked, his voice barely audible. The house is mine, I stated simply. It was purchased before we married, and while you contributed to the mortgage, Spencer assures me that with your financial misconduct and the evidence of your infidelity, it's a clear win for me. Plus, I've already started the refinancing process. It's going to be a fresh start. For me. I stood up, walking to the large bay window that overlooked our perfectly manicured suburban street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. It was a beautiful evening, a perfect backdrop for the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Brooks, I said, turning back to face him, a glint in my eye. You wanted a new life, a new beginning. Well, congratulations. You're getting one. Just not the one you envisioned. And I, for one, can't wait to see how this next act plays out. Because trust me, the main event is still to come. And I've got front row seats. He looked up, a flicker of something that might have been fear, or perhaps even a grudging respect in his eyes. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew I was prepared. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, completely in control. The stage was set, the audience was waiting, and the curtain was about to rise on the most spectacular show of my life. The main event, as I'd so eloquently put it to Brooks, kicked off with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop, if the bull was Spencer, and the china shop was Brooks's rapidly crumbling life. The divorce proceedings were less a negotiation and more a strategic dismantling. Spencer, my legal pit bull, had a field day. He presented the evidence of Brooks's infidelity, those delightful Vegas photos, the Serafina texts, with the precision of a surgeon and the glee of a game show host revealing the grand prize. And then came Chloe's financial forensics report, a masterpiece of digital detective work that laid bare Brenda Mae Jenkins's entire scam operation, with Brooks's emptied accounts as Exhibit A. "Your Honor," Spencer declared, his voice resonating through the hushed courtroom. Mr. Blackwell's reckless and negligent actions, fueled by an extramarital affair, not only constitute marital waste, but also demonstrate a complete disregard for the financial well-being of his spouse, Mrs. Reagan Blackwell. While he was busy funding a known romance scammer, Mrs. Blackwell was left to discover the extent of the damage and, frankly, the depth of his delusion. I sat there, perfectly composed in a tailored navy suit, looking every inch the wronged but resilient suburban wife. Brooks, on the other hand, looked like he'd been run over by a lawnmower and then left out in the rain. His expensive suit hung on him, his eyes were perpetually bloodshot, and he kept running a hand through his already disheveled hair. He tried to argue, to plead ignorance, to paint himself as the true victim of Brenda Mae. It was a performance worthy of a community theater production, but the jury of one, the judge, wasn't buying it. "Mr. Blackwell," the judge stated, her voice dry as a desert bone, "while the court sympathizes with anyone who falls victim to fraud, your actions, particularly the diversion of marital funds and your admitted infidelity, present a clear pattern of behavior detrimental to your marriage and your wife's financial security. The evidence presented by Mrs. Blackwell's counsel is compelling." The gavel came down, a sound that echoed like a triumphant gong in my ears. The house, our suburban sanctuary, was unequivocally mine. The joint accounts, once drained by Brenda Mae, were being meticulously rebuilt, with a significant portion of what could be salvaged from Brooks's remaining assets, which, let's be honest, wasn't much, directed my way to compensate for the marital waste. His pension, his company stock options, all were fair game. It was a financial bloodbath for him, a poetic justice for me. The best part? The judge also ruled that Brooks was responsible for a substantial portion of my legal fees. "Consider it a tuition fee, Mr. Blackwell," Spencer had quipped to him outside the courtroom, "for the School of Hard Knocks, where Serafina was your primary instructor." Brooks had just glared, speechless, probably calculating how many years it would take him to pay it all off. But the revenge wasn't just financial. Oh no, that would be too simple. The suburban grapevine, a force more powerful than any federal agency, had been working overtime. My perfectly curated social media posts, subtle, dignified, yet undeniably hinting at the betrayal, had done their job. The neighborhood soccer moms and country club wives were buzzing. Brooks became persona non grata at the annual block party, his name whispered with a mixture of pity and scandal. His former golf buddies suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Even his beloved fantasy football league dropped him. Apparently you can forgive a lot, but you don't mess with the fantasy league. His professional life also took a hit. Turns out, being known as the sales director who got conned out of his life savings by a fake spiritual guru while cheating on his wife isn't exactly a resume booster. The whispers reached his company. While they couldn't fire him for personal matters, his performance was suddenly under intense scrutiny. His numbers, once stellar, plummeted. His networking trips were now just trips. No more Vegas, no more conferences. He was, as they say, a hot mess in a tailored suit. The ultimate unexpected twist came a few weeks later. Chloe, still on Brenda Mae's digital trail, had managed to tip off the FBI. Turns out, Serafina wasn't just a small-time scammer. She was part of a much larger, sophisticated network. The news broke on national television, a segment on American Greed about a multi-state romance scam operation. There, in all her glory, was a mugshot of Brenda Mae Jenkins, looking far less spiritual and a lot more mugshotty. The irony was delicious. Brooks, watching from his new, considerably smaller apartment, must have choked on his takeout. He wasn't just a cuckold, he was a national punchline. My new normal was frankly fantastic. The house felt lighter, cleaner, infused with a fresh energy. I repainted the living room a vibrant teal, something Brooks would have considered too bold. I turned his dusty home office into my personal yoga studio. I started hosting girls' night brunches, complete with mimosas and unapologetic gossip. My career at the marketing firm was thriving. The newfound clarity and focus I had gained from dismantling my old life translated into brilliant campaigns. I even got a promotion. Turns out, navigating a personal dumpster fire makes you exceptionally good at crisis management. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was at Whole Foods, picking up ingredients for a gourmet meal I was making for myself. Because why wait for a man to cook for you? I spotted Brooks in the organic produce aisle, looking utterly lost, staring blankly at a bag of kale. He was wearing an ill-fitting hoodie, a far cry from his usual designer athleisure. He looked up, our eyes met, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of the man I once married. Before the delusion, before the Serafina, before the fall. He gave a weak, almost imperceptible nod. I, on the other hand, offered a small, polite smile, the kind you give to a distant acquaintance you barely remember. I grabbed my organic avocado, tossed it into my cart, and continued on my way, humming a little tune. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet, profound sense of victory. He was no longer a shadow over my life. He was just another shopper in Whole Foods, grappling with the existential dread of kale. The power dynamic had shifted completely. He, who once held the reins of our shared life, was now adrift. I, who had been invisible, was now the captain of my own ship, sailing smoothly through the waters of my newly reclaimed existence. The humor wasn't in his suffering, per se, but in the sheer absurdity of his downfall, the poetic justice of a man who thought he was a player being played, and a woman he underestimated rising from the ashes, stronger and wittier than ever. The universe, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor, and I was finally in on the joke. And let me tell you, it was hilarious. The dust settled. Or rather, the glitter from my revenge party finally settled. And I was left with something far more valuable than a clean slate, a perfectly polished, slightly cynical perspective on life. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I say what doesn't kill you makes for excellent material, and a surprisingly good excuse to redecorate. My life had been a meticulously curated Instagram feed, while behind the scenes it was a dumpster fire, waiting for a match. Looking back, the whole Brooks and Serafina saga was less a tragedy, and more a darkly comedic coming-of-age story for a woman who thought she had it all figured out. I used to believe in the fairy tale, the white picket fence, the whole suburban dream. Turns out the white picket fence was just a convenient place to hang all the red flags I'd been ignoring. It's funny how a man can be so utterly convinced of his own brilliance, only to be outsmarted by a woman he barely noticed, and a scammer with a stock photo for a profile picture. The biggest lesson? Never underestimate the quiet ones, or the ones who spend their evenings meticulously organizing their spice rack. We're either plotting world domination or, just really into paprika. But seriously, the assumption that I was just Brooks's wife, a pretty accessory with a knack for picking out throw pillows, was their fatal flaw. They mistook my composure for complacency, my patience for weakness. Big mistake. Huge. Brooks, bless his deluded heart, is now living in a studio apartment downtown, probably still trying to figure out how to work the communal laundry machine. His golf game, I hear, is as dismal as his credit score. He tried to get back into the social scene, but the suburban moms have a longer memory than an elephant with a grudge. He's basically a cautionary tale whispered over rosé at book club. A friend of a friend saw him at a dive bar, trying to explain cryptocurrency to a bartender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. It's almost sad if I weren't so busy enjoying my new outdoor patio furniture. The irony of him, the big-shot sales director, now struggling to sell himself a decent life, is not lost on me. It's the kind of poetic justice that makes you believe in karma, or at least in a really good lawyer. Spencer, my legal maestro, is still fielding calls from women who've heard my story and want their own slice of justice. He's practically a local legend, the legal equivalent of a rock star. Chloe, my financial ninja, has expanded her business, specializing in romance scam recovery and husband-proofing your assets. She even teaches a seminar at the local community college, which I'm pretty sure is called Don't Be a Brooks. Their success is a testament to the fact that good people, even in the messy aftermath of betrayal, can still thrive and even profit from cleaning up other people's train wrecks. As for me, Reagan Blackwell, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. I sold the house. Turns out, even with a fresh coat of paint, the memories of betrayal lingered like stale potpourri. I bought a chic loft in the city, a place with exposed brick and a view of the skyline, far from the manicured lawns and judgmental glances of the suburbs. I travel, I volunteer. I'm learning to speak Italian, mostly so I can order pasta with an authentic accent. I've even started dating again, though my vetting process now involves a full background check and a lie detector test. Kidding. Mostly. The freedom to choose my own path, to define my own happiness, is intoxicating. It's like finally getting to pick the music in your own car after years of listening to someone else's questionable playlist. The ultimate irony of it all is that Brooks's betrayal, intended to erase me, actually set me free. He wanted a new life with Serafina, and he got one, just not the one he envisioned. And I got a new life too, one I actually designed for myself, without the suffocating expectations of a man who thought a pretty face and a stable income were all I brought to the table. I was the whole damn table, the chairs, and the 5-course meal. He thought he was trading up, but he just traded a gourmet feast for a stale cracker. Life's funny like that. Sometimes, the universe has to burn everything down to show you what you're truly made of. And let me tell you, I'm made of steel, sarcasm, and an unshakable belief that a good Chardonnay can solve most problems. My story isn't about being a victim. It's about being the architect of my own comeback, with a side of deliciously dark humor. It's about realizing that sometimes, the best revenge isn't served cold, but with a perfectly timed punchline. It's about remembering that even when you feel like you're in a hot mess, you can still come out looking like a slay queen. So if you ever find yourself staring down a Serafina or a Brooks, remember this. They might try to dim your light, but darling, you're the whole damn supernova. And when they least expect it, you'll explode. Turns out, my happily ever after didn't need a Prince Charming. It just needed a good lawyer and a killer sense of humor.